Hi guys, it's Vanessa coming to you from the garden just northwest of Austin in Central Texas in the burbs. And today I have created a one-stop shop video for everything you need to be doing in December to get your garden ready for the spring and everything that you can plant still right now this time of year. So today I'm going to go over planting native wildflowers, perennials, how to build up your soil over the next couple months for an awesome spring season, and planting things like garlic, bulbing onions, and bulbing flowers. And how are those things a little bit different when we're growing them in Texas? We really have pretty mild winters, so it's important to take advantage of right now to do some things to set up your garden for the spring. Although pests are not in the forefront of our minds right now, although some of you may be still dealing with munching insects, I have cucumber beetles and cabbage moths still ravaging my plants. There is one secret that I use as part of my arsenal of things in my integrated pest management program to help greatly reduce some of the most annoying and difficult to deal with pests in the garden. And right now is the time that I use that secret because it's around 80 degrees or less during the day, and that is beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes are something that live in the soil already, but they may not live in great enough numbers to do any good for you without you inoculating with a larger population of them. What do beneficial nematodes do though? Beneficial nematodes actually go in and they eat the larval stage of some of our most annoying pests in the garden before they can even emerge and start to decimate our plants and our feet, like fire ants. Fire ants were a major issue in my Texas garden, as they are in many people's Texas gardens, and my fire ant population was reduced by almost 95% once I started spraying beneficial nematodes 1 to 2 times a year in the fall. I get my beneficial nematodes from naturesgoodguys.com, and you can also find them at local nurseries if you would like to support a local business. The reason I like getting them from Nature's Good Guys is because on their website they have a few different species of beneficial nematodes, and they have a list of the pests that those nematodes actually help with, and so you can decide which ones you may want to target with. Sometimes I just get the mixture of them to make sure I'm covering my bases, but specifically I am always getting the ones that treat fleas and ants and grubs and cucumber beetles. Those are the ones that I'm the most concerned with. I can't say that my cucumber beetle population has gone down drastically, but it is manageable, and between using beneficial nematodes and inviting things like birds into my backyard and garden, my beetle population has been a lot better in the last year to year and a half. So how do you spray beneficial nematodes? Well, you put them into a hose-in sprayer, comes in a little packet that looks like this, and you dilute that in water in a hose-in sprayer and you spray it throughout your entire garden. Beneficial nematodes move through the water, as do bad nematodes. They need liquid to survive. So after you treat with beneficial nematodes, you will want to make sure your garden stays nice and moist for a couple weeks, and that could be something as simple as putting in a back and forth sprinkler that covers the majority of your garden space, because right now you don't have to deal with as much disease, and the plants that can handle getting watered from above more than likely going to be things like carrots, cruciferous vegetables, and other leafy greens. One way to fix a lot of problems in your soil and improve your soil quality over the winter is to plant cover crops. Cover crops not only protect your soil, but they help reduce root knot nematodes, soil erosion, and they can improve soil texture, which can help with water retention. The 2 cover crops that I'm planting this winter are Elbon rye and Kodiak mustard. Kodiak mustard is specifically cultivated for reducing root knot nematodes because it's really high in biofumigants. Biofumigants are something that help with reducing root knot nematodes and other soil-borne pests, and Elbon rye can also help reduce root knot nematodes and also is a great cover crop to protect any soil erosion and increase organic matter levels in your soil. So with cover cropping, you're quite literally covering the soil with the crop. So I'm sowing it densely like grass, and I'm mixing the two together here. This was actually sown as a cover crop. Crimson clover is in the pea family, which means it does fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and put it into nodules in the soil. So I'm using this to build up the soil over here, but I also knew I was going to leave it long enough to let it bloom like this to bring in pollinators early on in the season. And then I will chop it and drop it after I've harvested what I want off of it and when I'm ready to plant other things in its place. Cover cropping doesn't have to be used just in in-ground beds. I actually built new beds using the Garden in Minutes irrigation system along with the matching Garden in Minutes raised beds this year because I had a massive root knot nematode problem in my garden. The root knot nematodes never truly go away, but you can knock down their populations using different techniques. So I planted Kodiak, mustard, and Elbon rye seeds all throughout my garden. I also planted them in my raised beds. So let me show you what that looks like because they're planted in the soil surface and I'm using them as a green mulch as the plants that are already almost fully mature in those raised beds are almost ready for me to start picking and eventually harvest. And once they get picked, I will cut them at the soil surface, leaving their root system intact to feed the microbiome that's already there. And then the cover crop will grow in until about February and I will terminate that cover crop, turn it into the top layer of soil, and hopefully the biofumigation technique will reduce any root knot nematodes that could have come up from the base of the soil when I tore down my original beds and could have populated somewhat in the new soil that I just added. Now, it's a little bit on the later side to be planting garlic. I'm going to show you me planting garlic because I just got it in about a week and a half ago, and I'll show you what it looks like right now because we've got sprouts that are anywhere from this size to about this size throughout the garden. And a lot of the time in Texas, it doesn't get very cool outside until late November going into December. So I just try to get my garlic in the ground about midway through November, but it doesn't always happen. And I end up harvesting still around June to July, and my heads of garlic are nice and big still. So if you still haven't put garlic in the ground, just know you can go throw out some cloves right now and you will probably still get a pretty decent harvest. So here's my seed garlic stash, and here's some of the varieties that I've grown over the years. This is mainly a giant Romanian garlic that I've just been collecting the largest cloves of, and each year I replant the biggest cloves so I can continue to get bigger heads of garlic. But I did order some new varieties from Burpee, and these are the ones on the screen here. So I'm usually planting my garlic about 4 to 6 inches apart, and I'm putting it all throughout the garden in all different areas, in containers and in the ground. And I'm trying to cover them with about 3 to 4 inches of soil and or mulch. This is lightly mulched in this shot, but I did go in and add more mulch. You can see some of the sprouts that are coming in. So this is the easy straw that I was mentioning. You can get it at Tractor Supply. It's just easier to find in the springtime. And then I did also add some bone meal to a couple of the larger pots in my garden, and I planted out multiple cloves of garlic. This is going to be some of my smaller soft neck garlic cloves, so I don't think they're going to get as big, and I'm packing them in a little bit tight on here, so you might want to space them out a little bit more. But I had over 160 cloves of garlic to plant out, and I really started running out of room, honestly, so we got a little wild with it over here with the garlic. It's also time to plant your flowering bulbs. That's things like tulips, but if you can find tulips pre-chilled, that's going to be best because they need a lot of chill hours in order to bloom. But I like to do ranunculus and daffodils and some grape hyacinths. They look really nice. I'm just taking them and spacing them out like not even an inch from each other, burying them about 3 to 4 inches deep, dumping soil on top of them, hoping that the squirrels don't dig them up, and then I'm going to mulch this area pretty heavily. You don't want them to sprout with our warm winters. When growing bulbing onions, you can start them from seed, but you want to start them in the middle of October, but to be honest with you, you should be starting them in September because they take a bit to get going. They need a lot of nitrogen to actually grow from a tiny little chive looking thing to a green onion sized plant, and that is the size you want to be able to transplant outside. You can direct sow onion seeds in the garden. It's just a little difficult because of how wimpy those sprouts are to make sure nothing outside in your Texas garden is going to munch it or smash it or dig it up. So I like to start onion seeds inside if I do have my crap together in time. This year I ordered live onion plants from growhaas.com, which is Haas Seeds, and they were shipped to me, and I got them this last week because this is the beginning of the season of when we would start planting live onion plants outside. So with planting bulbing onions though, you're not trying to plant them deep like you do with the garlic. I'm doing just above where the little root system is and just packing it in lightly. I put a bunch of blood meal down, and these will get watered in with a nitrogen-based fertilizer because onions need a lot of nitrogen in the first stages to get lots of greens, which will support bigger bulbs. Now, there are some people who do not plant live onion plants until January outside, but honestly, if you have the plants, you might as well get them planted. Bulbing onions can handle a light frost. If we have a really hard frost that's anything 25 degrees or below for an extended amount of time, you're definitely going to want to be able to cover with a sheet and make sure they're watered deeply and mulched, but they will survive. You may see a little bit of burning or scorching at the end or a little bit of wiltiness, but they're going to come back for you, and usually around May is when the actual onions have bulbed up and they are ready for harvesting. So just like we plant garlic this time of year because it needs to go through a period of cold, there are some fruit trees and fruit plants that need to go through a period of cold, which is usually calculated by the minimum amount of chill hours that that plant will need in order to give you a good fruit set. Two of those plants that I have right now are the peach tree in my front yard and the blueberry plants that I have. Now, blueberries are more of a northern plant, so you do not see a lot of southern gardeners successfully growing large amounts of blueberries very easily. But blueberries themselves can grow in our area. There's just a few caveats. They need to be in pots because they really like acidic soil, and it's really hard to keep our clay soil amended and acidified as much as possible. And you need to get varieties of blueberries that require very little chill hours. So I grow the sunshine variety of blueberries, and they require only 200 hours of chill. So if we have a really warm winter, they will still get just enough hours to set fruit. The peach tree that's in my front yard is a mystery peach tree. We have no idea what kind of peaches it actually grows, but we are pretty sure it's a Red Haven or a May Haven peach because it sets fruit in May, which is very early. So it sets its flowers really early in February as well. And we think that it requires a very low amount of chill hours, which is why we get over 40 pounds of peaches almost every year off of the tree. Now, this is a potted fig tree, and this is a patio fig tree, but this is what my fig tree looked like that I did plant in the ground a year and a half ago, and I planted it exactly this time of year. The reason it's good to plant perennials and fruit trees in the ground in the fall and in the mild early winter portion, which is considered the December timeframe, is because this is the most mild temperatures we're going to have. It may be cold outside and the plants may look ugly and be dormant, but underneath the surface of the soil, their roots are able to slowly get established without having to worry about putting a bunch of energy into the upper level of growth into these leaves. And you're not planting them in late spring going into 100-degree temps and extreme drought with pest pressure like you would like if you went and got fruit trees in the spring and decided to try and put them in the ground then. So this is what my fig tree looked like when I planted it in the ground a year and a half ago in the fall. And this is what my fig tree looks like going into the winter this year. And not all fruit trees should be planted in the ground depending on what zone you live in. I live in zone 9A, which means that technically it's supposed to only get into the low 20-degree temperature average when it gets to the coldest temps here. But for the last 2 to 3 years, it's gotten down to about 12 to 15 degrees at a certain point. That is a little too cold for citrus trees to survive. And you may be able to plant your citrus trees in the ground and cover them really well to protect them from that kind of cold dip. But a lot of citrus growers in my area and even all the way down to the Houston area, which can be up to zone 9B, 10A, have lost their in-ground citrus trees to the point where a lot of us grow citrus in pots year round now. Now, citrus does really well in pots. This is a key lime tree. It's a younger one, so it's on the smaller side, but you can see it's loaded with blooms. And if I see temps that are going to be in the 35 to 32 degree range in my forecast, I will then deeply water my plants and either put them up against my back porch so they can have some moderated heat and warmth from my house, or they will come inside or go in my garage. So understanding which ones of your plants can stay outside and which ones should get some more protection is a great way for you to confidently go into this winter time frame, because January, February is when we are at risk of having the coldest temps out of the entire year. And sometimes we may only get 1 or 2 nights at that level of cold to where it's worth it to protect your plants for a couple nights, and then they can go right back outside and vibe with the rest of everything growing out. Now, for garlic, chill time is called vernalization. And for peach trees and blueberries, chill time is just called chill hours. And with seeds that need cold in order to sprout properly, it's called stratification. And wildflower seeds, specifically the native wildflower seeds here in Texas, need stratification in order to bloom properly. So in nature, a wildflower would bloom, and that would happen peak May timeframe, which is why we call it no-mow May. And then it would go to seed in June, July, and either birds or the wind would spread the seeds. and they would lay dormant over the summertime, and going into the fall and winter, they would get that cold stratification of the cold weather months. They would get some precipitation, hopefully, but a lot of native Texas wildflowers are really well suited to drought conditions. And then as soon as the days get long enough, going into February, March, April, May, we get that April-May rainy time frame, they will then start to germinate and get ready for blooming. So if we are going to add wildflower seeds to our gardens here in Texas, we are going to want to plant them right before the cold weather months as early as possible, starting from October all the way through December and sometimes early January, where they can get as much cold stratification as possible, where they can bloom and be some of our pollinators' first blooms that they can get a hold of and get nectar and support from in our gardens. And not only are we supporting native wildlife, they're beautiful to have on hand. Now, one thing you'll hear me talk a lot about in the summer months is mulching your plants. And that's actually important in the winter months too. Now, if we're going into the early spring time frame, the soil's already cold. So actually doing a thinner layer of mulch can help the sun warm up the soil temperatures a little bit better for your plants that may need warmer soil temps in order to germinate and thrive. But outside of that time frame, mulching can really protect the soil life, the microbiome in your soil, which is a living, breathing system of organisms. And it can really help with making sure that things don't freeze solid in the soil sometimes. It will help keep whatever moisture or precipitation we are getting in the soil as well, which is once again great for the life of the soil. Now, you can use different things as mulch, but my favorite thing to use right now is dead leaves. I don't have a lot of leaves in my yard. I don't have a lot of trees that are at my disposal. So I will find a few elderly people in my neighborhood each year that may need help with raking leaves. Instead of charging them to rake their leaves, I just ask them information about their yards. And I usually will pick elderly people who do have landscapers, or they may maintain a perennial type garden in their front yard, because usually they are not using as harsh of chemicals in their lawn. Or if their lawn looks like crap year round, they're usually a safe person to get leaves from. And I will go rake their leaves and then either add that to my compost, or I will use it as mulch in my garden. If you chop up the leaves with a weed whacker in a trash can or with a mulching machine, then it will stay in place a little bit more, because my backyard is pretty windy, so sometimes the leaves will blow away. Other than that, I like to use Easy Straw from Tractor Supply to mulch a lot of my area if I can get my hands on it. It's just hard to find this time of year. Speaking of raking the leaves, I would only be raking leaves of someone's yard who had the desire to rake their leaves no matter what, and they were either going to pay someone to do it or I could do it for free. But if you have leaves that have fallen in your yard, if you have the ability to leave them in place without getting in trouble with your HOA, that's going to be a great way to allow native pollinators to have somewhere to actually harbor over in the cooler dormant months and then come back to life in the spring. So if you can leave the leaves, that's the ideal scenario, but it's just not the world that we live in a lot of the time. So if someone's going to rake their leaves, you might as well take advantage of getting them and either using them as mulch in your garden or adding them to your compost to add lots of fungal and fungally dominated leaf mold into your compost that might be ready by the spring. Well, that's not an exhaustive list, but that should keep you busy for the month of December on anything that you think you could be taking care of to really set yourself up for an awesome spring and summer garden this coming 2025 year here in Central Texas or anywhere in the South in general. I hope this video has instilled some confidence in you to get out there and plant some seeds and get your hands dirty. And as always, I am so thankful for every single one of you guys as my subscribers and quite frankly, part of my personal gardening community here. I always appreciate you watching to the end of any video if you make it to this point. There's no reason to be afraid to get out there and try new things in the garden, because remember, if you never grow, you'll never know.